Hello, frugal chicken peeps. Give me 1 second here. I am struggling a bit with my phone here because it's connected to my laptop. I'll move right here. Really, phone? You're not gonna work with me here. Oh, are you fucking kidding me? Guys, you know what? I'm gonna hold this because I am getting really annoyed with my phone. Anyways, I had to plug it into my computer because it was dying. So I wanted to come on here really quick and talk about this buzz that's going on about this Veterinary Feed Directive, which is a final rule that the Food and Drug Administration just issued. Before we start, I'm going to say two things. One, I'm not a vet, so we all know that I'm not a vet, so this is my interpretation, this is my experience. This is what I think it means and how I think it's going to affect us. But I'm not a vet. Two, I did work for the Food and Drug Administration for 10 years. I did not work with the Center for Veterinary Medicine. I worked in over-the-counter drugs. So I do have a bit of insight into how these laws are made and why they exist the way that they exist. I'm not a lawyer. So again, this is just simply my interpretation based on having read the directive, having read the final rule, and what I think. So take this just as what I think, okay? So don't hold me to it. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Veterinary Feed Directive is a final rule issued by the Food and Drug Administration, which takes antibiotics that can be put in feed and water off the market. It takes it from over-the-counter status to prescription status, meaning that in order to get these antibiotics, you are going to have to get a vet's approval. You're going to have to get a prescription from a vet. Now, this is causing a lot of hysteria in the backyard farming community because everyone's like, how am I going to get my penicillin in case my animals get sick? I'm not comfortable with that angle. You guys are like seeing my double chin here. Here's the thing. I've read a lot of blog posts about it. I've read a lot of different opinions about this feed directive. And the reason why I wanted to come on here is because I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think that there's a lot of unclear information out there. So this is my interpretation. I did read the final rule when it came out, and I read it again this morning so that I could I tell you guys what I think. And again, this is simply my interpretation. What is being said out there is that the Food and Drug Administration, the Center for Veterinary Medicine, is taking all over-the-counter injectable drugs off the market. That is not my interpretation. When I read the rule, what it says is they're removing the over-the-counter antibiotics that can be added to feeds and to water. This mainly applies to industry, to big farming, where what they do is by default, they automatically give the animals antibiotics. And what that does is it helps ward off any potential infections. The animals grow better and they grow faster. Obviously, this is something the FDA took into consideration because we're having a lot of issues as human beings with superbugs that are antibiotic resistant, and they kind of said, well, this is because we have so many drugs, so many antibiotics in our food, in our food supply. So now what we're doing is we're only allowing these big industry, these big feed companies to administer these drugs under a veterinary prescription. It's basically meant to reduce the amount of drugs in our food supply, the amount of antibiotics in our food supply, which are being given by default, right? So that's kind of where it applies. So, and you can understand why that's a good thing. We don't want all these antibiotics by default in our food supply unless it's absolutely critical. So that's why they came up with this rule. Now, like I said, there's my chickens in the background. There's other bloggers out there, and I haven't read everybody's blog. I haven't read everybody's opinion on it. So, I've only read a couple, so if you guys are seeing this, don't send me hate mail. I don't care. I haven't had time to read everybody's blogs, but there are bloggers out there who are saying that this means that injectables are coming off the market. Again, I read the rule. It doesn't say anything about injectables. The reason why other bloggers are interpreting it that way is because the law says water soluble, and technically speaking, injectables are water soluble, obviously. You can just stick them in the water. Is there potential for that sort of abuse? Yeah, probably, okay? But the way that these laws are structured, the laws have to be very specific about what they're including, what they're excluding. They have to be almost, in some ways, also just vague. So, and that's like why we have lawyers, because everything's up to interpretation. But my reading of it, my understanding from when the rule came out, is that they're not pulling injectables off the market. You can still go off and get your penicillin. I might be wrong on that. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a vet. That is my understanding, and other people I have talked to, other bloggers I've talked to who have asked their vets, have that same interpretation. It only applies to over-the-counter antibiotics that can be added to feed, which is something that typically as backyard farmers we don't do, but in the industry it is something that they do typically do by default. Now, if you think I'm talking out of my butt, what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to flip this around for a second. We're going to talk about what I'm doing to prepare, which I think you'll be kind of surprised about. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to show you, if my computer will let me, hopefully it will comply, an article. You see my lovely nose right now. There is an article that I want to refer you guys to. Now, here's the thing, okay? When you read these laws, that the final rule that the FDA has produced, when you read the codified law, which will come out, and the codified law is actually part of that final rule, it's really hard to understand what they're saying. It's written in plain language, but it's all legalese and it's all open to interpretation. And a lot of the issue we're having right now with what are we going to do, do we have to buy a whole bunch of antibiotics, is because they really haven't given much guidance about this. I mean, I read their guidances, I read their question and answers. The question and answers are more for like, what if I'm a vet? What if I'm a feed company? Their questions and answers don't necessarily cover people like us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to an article that the Cattle Network produced. And this is one of the bigger articles out there for the cattle industry. They have their own lawyers. They have their own people who interpret it. If they put out false information, then they get in bigger trouble than I ever will. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to refer to this article, and I'm going to flip this phone around and show it to you guys and see if I can show you the exact specific phrase where, according to this Cattle Network, injectables are not being taken off the market, so that we can have some sort of basis for this assumption, right? Okay, guys, here's my laptop. So, well, okay. Hold on, let me look it up here real quick. I'm sorry, guys. I should have had this. But this is the reason I'm... Okay. It says right here, the use of injectable antibiotics will not be affected, okay? Not all antibiotics are considered VFD drugs, Veterinary Food Directive drugs, okay? The use of injectable antibiotics will not be affected, okay? So that's kind of where I'm pulling this from. Again, this is my interpretation. I'm relying on this, and this is an article from March 30th, 2016. So it's a little bit old, but it says the new antibiotic rules for 2017, okay? If you guys want the URL for that, it's cattlenetwork.com/news/new-antibiotic. You know what, guys? I'll just show it to you instead of telling you what it is. So if you guys want to know what the article is, that is the URL right there, okay? Right there. And I'll put this in the notes below. But that's where I'm pulling it from. The reason, again, like I said, the reason I'm relying on this, in addition to my own interpretation of the final rule that I read, is because these guys have lawyers. These guys have people who whose job it is to interpret it and to put out correct information. If they want any credibility as a news site, then they're going to put out correct information. So, guys, that is my interpretation. That is why I'm not too overly concerned about it. The other reason, I said, well, so what am I going to do to prepare for this? Well, here's the thing. As backyard chicken owners, we don't typically rely on antibiotics. I know I don't. If I need antibiotics, actually, I use oral antibiotics. If I need antibiotics for my horses, I use SMZs. If I need them for my goats, I use SMZs. I don't personally use injectable antibiotics that often because if they need it, they probably need an IV, and I'm not that into injectable antibiotics. I prefer the oral ones. You get the point. So I'm not personally stocking up. If I need the injectables, I go to the vet, they give me a prescription, and honestly, guys, it's cheaper. Like, my vet, I think it's like a couple dollars for an injection of penicillin. I know I'm getting the right dose, I don't have to question it. I'm not a huge fan of the vets around here, but they do give me what I need when I need it. I've had issues with keeping the bottles on hand where it gets all funkified in my refrigerator, so I'm personally not wigging out over this. I know that there are people who have a lot of goats, who have a lot of cattle, who are concerned about this, but as backyard farmers, we're typically not always in that group of individuals. Now, what I am doing, though, is I'm becoming better aware of what essential oils I can use. And again, because I'm bound by what I can say about that, but I'm becoming better educated about essential oils. Thank you for the like. That, to me, guys, is a better response to this than going off and buying a whole bunch of injectable antibiotics that a year from now are probably going to be out of date. So that's what I'm doing. I am obviously I work with doTERRA. I partnered with doTERRA on essential oils. You can use whatever essential oils you want. Like we talked about yesterday, purity is an issue. Purity is a big deal, especially if you are concerned about purity. Let's just put it that way. Again, I'm tied by what I can say and what I can't say. If you have any questions about any of this, you can just message me, of course. But that is what I'm doing. I'm learning about essential oils, how I can use essential oils on my farm to have a healthy farm. So that's my interpretation, guys. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a vet. So this is just me telling you what I think. But again, I have worked with FDA for many, many years. I have run these finals before. So I kind of know how to interpret them. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but that's just my understanding. I think that there's a lot of speculation at this point. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of hype. I'm not personally convinced that it's necessary. So, if you're a backyard chicken owner and you're not relying on antibiotics anyways, which you probably shouldn't be unless it's truly an issue and your vet prescribes it, because you don't want it in the eggs, you don't want it in the meat, this isn't really going to affect you. So don't necessarily get so caught up in the hype about it, if that makes any sense. I've had people comment on the blog about it. I've had people tell me I should stock up on my antibiotics. I don't personally rely on them too much. If they are needed, and there are cases where they're needed, guys, if your animal has a big infection, it's needed. But at that point in time, you're probably going to want to consult the vet anyways. Just my opinion. So, guys, I hope that this has helped. I hope it's kind of answered some of your questions. If you do have questions about it, leave it below. Don't send me hate mail. I'm not going to read it. I don't care. I'm pretty sure my interpretation's right. Okay, guys, I hope this has helped. Again, I'll put the URL to this article from the Cattle Network below, and if you have any questions, leave them below. You can also message me if you have any questions. But just remember, learn about essential oils. If you're not using antibiotics, it's probably not going to affect you. And if you do need antibiotics, call your vet. Your vet's going to be more than happy to help. And getting antibiotics from your vet isn't that expensive anyways. Okay? So, guys, I hope this has helped. Thanks for watching. Bye.